Joining me now from Los Angeles is retired Los Angeles Police Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. She is also the author of Black and Blue. Sergeant Dorsey, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
First question for you. The district attorney has said he will decide this week whether charges are filed in the death of Rayshard Brooks. What are the questions the DA will be looking to answer as this footage is reviewed?
Well, I mean, listen, a probable cause is a very low threshold, and he's already telegraphed he's there. This was an unjustified shooting. Mr. Brooks was compliant. He was polite in the beginning. And what ultimately happened is inherent to police work. When you tell someone they're about to go to jail, or when you make a move to put a handcuff on someone, it's not uncommon for someone to run. And so these officers dropped the ball. They should have anticipated this. They spent 20 minutes with Mr. Brooks. And as I'm watching and listening, the more I hear, the more problematic it is. You have someone who's asleep behind the wheel of the car, and you wake them up and you tell them to drive some distance away and park it. What if he had driven and been involved in a traffic collision and killed someone? Those officers would be liable.
Right. They asked him to go park the car there from the drive-through. Well, I'm going to ask you, when a person you were trying to arrest, as they were attempting to do, takes off running, he did strike the officer, he had his taser gun, but how are officers trained vis-a-vis using deadly force when someone is running away from them?
You can only use that force reasonable to overcome resistance. You can't use deadly force because you can't catch someone physically. And so we know, we see now, we hear the officer fired his taser and it was ineffective. This is a veteran officer. He should have known that quite possibly if his taser was ineffective, then the one in the possession of Mr. Brooks could have conceivably been ineffective. And so you don't get to shoot and kill somebody because you can't catch them. And listen, I said from the very beginning, this was about punishing Mr. Brooks because after all, he did take his taser. And now we've heard the officer in his own words. He took my effing taser. That's what bothered him. And then when he got him, he did a little victory lap by saying, I got him. This was punishment. It was unnecessary.
And Mr. Brooks also offered to walk home. He said his sister lived nearby. Could that have been an option they would consider or no?
Not an option I would have considered. If you believe that he's under the influence, now he's in your care and custody, and you have an affirmative responsibility to make sure that that person gets somewhere safely. Now, if that's somewhere, if you don't want to make an arrest, and the officers have great discretion, if you don't want to arrest him, then take him to the police station and call a family member to come and pick him up. But you can't leave him on the street. You can't allow him to drive away because by their own admission, he was under the influence. Again, city liability. If he gets involved in a traffic collision and hurts someone or himself, the officers are liable because they knew that and they allowed him to continue on behind the wheel.
Well, as this country grapples with how to restructure police departments, Sergeant Dorsey, do you believe from serving in the LAPD for so many years that officers necessarily wouldn't want some of their duties to respond to everything and anything reduced?
Well, listen, there are certain things that officers respond to that, some are not equipped and don't feel comfortable handling. But, that's part of the job as well. When we become police officers, you understand that part of what we do is keeping the peace. Part of what we do is resolving conflict. It's counseling. We respond to domestic disputes where folks are not getting along, neighbor disputes, and we're there to keep the peace, and we're there to counsel. We're there to be a cooler head, to give advice, and that's inherent to police work. And so if that's not really what you want to do, then you're probably in the wrong profession. You have to do it based on your training and a little common sense and good judgment.
Right, and I think it's what's been troubling for so many people with this particular story is that it started out just as someone falling asleep in a drive-through at a fast food joint, and we saw George Floyd die because he allegedly passed a $20 counterfeit bill. That hurts.
Listen, and what if Mr. Brooks was having a medical emergency? It's almost as if police officers, when they're dealing with Black folks, don't think that maybe we could be suffering from some kind of a medical emergency. This is not the first time a Black man had fallen asleep at a drive-through. Willie McCoy in Vallejo, California, shot and killed. Officers didn't take into consideration that maybe this wasn't someone who was under the influence of drugs or someone who had been drinking. Maybe they were having a medical emergency, because we get sick too.
We appreciate your expertise and your insights. Thank you so much, Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey Forrest. Thank you.
Thank you.